Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our talk today on character skills. I'm Rory Rackham. I'm lead game designer working on player skills for Path of Exile 2. I'm joined by our principal animator, Ed, who's done all of the amazing animations for the player character, and Jonathan, the game director, who you will remember from earlier. So, today we're going to talk about all the huge improvements we've got to player skills in Path of Exile 2. We're going to talk about how combat flow is massively improved by animations and motion, and we're also going to talk about how we've got a new depth of skill variety, doing things we've never done before with skills, and thanks to our revamped skill and support system, as well as all sorts of fancy new features. We will start looking at combat flow. So, Path of Exile 1 had a few issues with character animation, mostly stemming from the fact that our rigs were prehistoric, I'd say, a little outdated, and that limited what we could do with animations and limited how well our animators could stretch their animation muscles. Would that be accurate, Ed?
Yeah, no, they were borderline unusable. Some of them, quite a few of them actually, we were animating straight onto the joints of the character, which is a very painful process. Some of them had strange little quirks, like Ranger, for instance, her spine would just disappear randomly, and you'd have to go looking for that. And also they were all unique and uniquely named, so there was no ability to share anything between them. So everything we had to do from scratch. And it was, it wasn't very good.
It meant that whenever I said, oh, can we get a new spellcast animation? It's like, well, it's a horrible, painful process for 7 characters, and then every combination of weapons that the spell could be used with, which was all of them. So
there was a lot of disagreement when a new skill was being made. A lot.
The slow, dreadful walk towards the animation area when I'm like, I've got some bad news, everyone. In addition, all these animation improvements, well, the lack of animation improvements meant that we were stuck using the same animations for many skills, and that meant almost no motion to them. Your character was standing very still until from the start of the animation until the end of the animation, and any time that meant we had any decent length attack time or cast time on a skill, you would just be sitting there and waiting for the skill to finish. There is no real input from the player from the moment they press the button until the moment they've been stunned out of it by a monster hitting them because they couldn't move. So we needed a new form of mobility, and we had also just relied on increasing the speed of skills significantly over time just to get rid of this feeling. Every skill had to be fast because it just didn't feel great without it. Even from the very low levels, the player is moving very quickly in a way that's unrealistic for an untrained person washing up on a beach to swing a sword. Here is a close look at one of our fancy new animations. This is the Whirling Assault skill. It shows some mobility. The player can control their motion as they use the skill, and the animations look gorgeous. Right, Ed? Yeah. He knows it. So now they have flow, they have natural motion, and they have just control that the player's never been able to have before. Do you want to tell us a bit about how we started off?
Yeah, so I've wanted to work on the character animations for a long time. I've been at this company about 8 years, and to me the old character animations always felt a bit clunky, a bit spongy, particularly in early game. They just didn't really feel satisfying to kill things with, and killing should be fun. So
in game.
In game, yeah. Of course. And so I have a bit of a background with Shaolin martial arts, and I also just have a very strong opinion of what I think looks good. And so with that, I started to work on the just basic attacks of the character, just making sure that even swinging a sword with no audio, no special effects, felt impactful. And yeah, with the new rigging, this meant that I didn't have to worry about doing this for each individual character. I could just focus on each individual weapon and make them feel unique and individual. Yeah.
Yeah, even outside the animations, it was also a big focus. Even the basic attack should feel punchy. We've got hit effects, assuming you're doing enough damage to the target, you'll get some punchy hit effects. You've got some cool blood going on that's reacting to the angle and direction of the swing, and now the color of the blood of the monster, which is something we didn't have before when every stone golem was filled with jam. So that, even just starting at the most basic level, right, the very first time you swing the weapon at a monster on the beach, should feel like a whole other game, really. Looking at the momentum and the actions, this is where there's been a huge amount of iteration, all sorts of cool tech that we've got to make the character feel mobile, make the character feel like they've got control, and that everything has a physical presence to it. So the basic melee attacks all have a step attack built into them. So if you're up close, you'll just perform the attack normally. But if you're at a distance while running towards the monster, you will start the attack while continuing on at your movement speed. And then by the time you reach them, that's when your weapon will strike them. So it has a really strong flow of the motion of your movement leads directly into the attack, which also gives melee characters a huge combat advantage, because the monster is maybe realizing you're in their face and is about to start the swing when you've already got your weapon most of the way towards their face. This has just resulted in much smoother melee combat. And for the non-basic melee attacks, we want to also bring in that kind of smooth motion to it. So, do you want to tell us about the step attacks, on how we did that for the regular melee attacks first?
Yeah, so for every standard stationary melee attack, they've all got an additive animation, usually from the waist down, which just adds a little step, depending on how much anticipation the attack has before the contact. Sometimes that's very small, sometimes that can be somewhere around a second. And that's usually custom done to the attack, so it shouldn't be some weird, janky, foot slidey mess. It should flow nicely into the action. And then when we do have attacks that have movement built into them, we've also got a different variant of that, which will play depending on whether you've come from a run or if that attack is far away and you just have to move a little bit more to get into range. So we've really gone all out on trying to keep your character moving, keep them alive.
Yeah, we discovered it was very important with the step attacks that the step has to be additive, because your whole body goes into the swing when you're doing a proper melee swing. You can't just lock off the hips and just be moving your upper body to do the swinging. So it all flows so much more efficiently. Yeah.
Any idea, Ed, how many animations it requires to just do a single simple attack? Like how many different animations and variants there are?
Well, there's a little bit coming up with how many animations there are, but there's most basic attacks will have 2 different steps. Excuse me. So with some of the shorter ranged anticipations, we were getting some foot flicker when you were coming out of a run. So we had to do steps that started with the left foot forward and steps that started with the right foot forward. And then we also have different animations, of course, if you're holding a sword and a shield, or a sword and a sword, or a sword and a scepter. And so, yeah.
It explodes.
It explodes.
Yeah,
There's a lot of animation. I've been busy.
Another thing that we've done for attacks is that we have a system that we've internally called pushy mode, very catchy name, where objects that have size, usually you can walk up to them and you and the zombie just can't move past each other. But now if you're bigger than the zombie's bigger than you, or you're doing an attack that has some motion to it, you'll have bonus pushiness and you can move that monster with you with the attack or slide them to the side, depending on the skill. And very large monsters can just push straight through swarms of enemies to reach you. And conversely, when you, say, turn into a giant bear, you can now just wander through monsters as they're pushed to the side. And they don't really... Being a bear does have an advantage of size in more ways than one. And that also just makes combat feel like we can block the player off, because now they have options to push through if they haven't got too surrounded or they aren't fighting anything too large. We also have much more control during the actions. There's a window at the start of every attack, and sometimes throughout an entire attack, where you can just shift your direction, meaning if you start a very long attack, you can realize you've made a huge tactical blunder and switch to which direction you're attacking entirely. The longer the attack, the more you can turn around during it. It makes it great for following a target as well. Previously, if you start an attack and the monster just stepped slightly to the side, then you're just watching as you perform a big swing at nothing. Now you have full control of it. And we've also changed the area where you can cancel on attacks. So you can break out early, or you can break out afterwards just by walking or performing another skill that could interrupt it. And that just lets us increase the attack time on some skills, if we so desire. Not every skill is going to be a super slow thing. The idea is that you've got an option now, but it's much more advantageous and less of a mistake to press a long attack time button if you've timed it wrong. You can always change your mind at the last minute. That also leads into our dodge roll. Dodge roll can cancel out of any action, making it great for a slow attacker, where no matter how big an attack you've got going on, if you realize the monster is a boss or a monster is about to squish you, you can just roll out of there. As Jonathan mentioned during the keynote, you can have immunity to attacks and many projectiles right at the start of the dodge roll. So, as you can see in this example here, the player is just perfectly timing their dodges so that they're missing every single attack from the enemy. You can't cancel the dodge roll itself, so the biggest disadvantage of it is that once you've started it, you can't be attacking until you've finished the roll. It's really the one downside of it, because the dodge roll also has massive mobility. You can switch your direction mid-dodge roll. Doesn't matter which way you're facing when you press the button, because you can just switch and change your mind if you realize, maybe I want to go in an opposite direction. And it is not faster than running. It might look faster than running. It is more stylish than running. And it is hard sometimes to stop yourself just rolling everywhere. It's technically a defensive advantage, just in case there was some monster that you hadn't seen coming at you. You never know. My advice is roll everywhere all the time.
Right. Just to clarify that, it isn't that it's not faster at some points in the animation, it's faster at the start and then slower at the end.
Yes,
yes. So that means that the overall average speed is the same as your run, but you get faster and then slower.
And it does scale with your move speed as well.
Yeah.
So the faster your character's move speed, the slightly shorter the dodge and slightly further it will take you. So it evens out, and it makes the animation still feel natural. It doesn't get crazy fast until your character gets ridiculously fast.
Right. I'd just like to draw attention on that last slide, by the way, to the fact the character is rolling between the monster's legs.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't work with slams, as you can see from this poor dead character here. Do you want to tell us about some of the blending between the animations that we have?
Yeah, so I took a different approach to a lot of the attacks and how they were animated. In the past, we had the characters idle, and every attack would start and finish in that same idle. To try and get the combat to keep moving, I just kind of did away with that. And if you saw with the basic attack before, it was more of a left-right continuous motion with it. And as you can see here, this guy just keeps rolling with the slams. What I found while I was doing that was a lot of attacks had common points that they would move through. And those kind of came, I guess you could call them like sub-idles, in which to start and end attacks in. And totally intentionally, it flowed together very nicely. Wasn't a surprise at all. But yeah, I don't know. We've also got blending for when attacks don't have those similar starting and end points. So if you do have an attack that finishes over here and the next one starts down here, there'll be a slight blend to try and smooth that transition. And yeah, it just helps keep the character feeling alive, energetic. We've been really trying to get rid of like awkward stops in combat. Like combat, you don't really tend to stop and change what you're doing. It should keep flowing. Yeah.
Nice. Some more improvements we got. Oh yeah. Speed variation on animations. Tell us
This is
about
another
this.
thing. So in order to keep things pretty, with the longer animations that we have, when you start to speed them up to ridiculous speeds, as happens in this game, if you've got a lot of detail in an action, that detail starts to get really messy. And so a way to combat that was we came up with speed variations. So at certain speed brackets, the animation of the attack will change to a slightly shorter version, which better suits that speed. And every attack has around 4. Some of them more or less, depending on how speed affects them.
Which, when Jonathan was asking about the number of animations, just all that previous number, just multiply it by 4.
Yeah, that adds to the number of steps and variations that, that I've been doing.
It basically means it's very hard for your character to feel like they're being played in fast forward. It feels like natural combat. That's what you're going through.
But it's also only so effective. At a certain point, you're just going to turn into a human blender again.
Yeah, when I say. Can you make it look good when I'm attacking 15 times a second, please?
I'll do my
natural,
best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do what I can with those 3 frames.
So we also have a lot more of the skills effects and a lot of the skills actual damage patterns and impacts coming from the animation itself. So we have these beautiful animations and the effects are tied into them directly. Our effects artists have made some amazing trails that just add so much to the swings that they perfectly match the motion of the swing, and the timing is all animation controlled and tweaked in the animation. You can see in the example here they've tweaked the curve of the swing to match the motion of the attack perfectly, and all the audio events and the position of all the damage is just right there, and we can match it perfectly where the position of the weapon is at that point in time. And that just makes it all feel so much smoother. You don't notice it, and that's when you know it's working correctly, because everything feels like it's right on point. And it means also we've got so many more spellcasting animations, so much variety on the spellcasting, and that's just the kind of thing where you see the frost going up the character's hand leading up to the point where they perform the spellcast, and it just feels really cool as well. You'll notice that a lot of the animations we have are very bespoke, very unique to the weapon type. Early on when we were working on skills and working on the animations for them, we realized we couldn't make a whirling assault that would also just feel right with a spear without it being basically a different skill just crammed into the same gem. So we have decided that every weapon type, every skill gem for that weapon type is restricted to that specific weapon, and this gives every weapon a really strong identity. You feel like a monk when you're using a quarterstaff, even if you're somehow a marauder who's got a huge amount of dexterity and intelligence.
Yeah, you can dance around as a marauder, which is spectacular.
Mm-hmm. And this also just lets us have mechanics that are specific to each weapon type. Like, for example, maces are amazing at breaking armor, and then when you want to mix and match those mechanics, it works really well, because you have these sort of unique mechanics that come from the skills. You have these unique forms of movement, where every weapon moves differently, and it just results in it playing differently. It feels like a different weapon type can feel like a completely different class, which is especially cool when you can combine them together. So let's jump off from there and talk about skill variety. So Path of Exile 1 had a few issues that we wanted to focus on changing up for Path of Exile 2. The main one comes from the fact that you feel that every skill you can only really have one truly powerful skill that your character is invested in, and everything else is supplementary. It's very hard to have 2 skills that work together because of the nature of various systems, which we'll get into a second. This means that every skill needs to be pretty good at doing just about everything. You can't have something with a single job. And it means that situational skills, like for example a skill that has a very long attack time, they have very little place in the game. This is caused mostly by the socket system, where you will usually only have one fully supported skill, and a fully supported skill is so much more powerful than one that isn't supported. And you might have 2 if you're lucky, but even then, if you did have extra sockets, you're usually better off putting those sockets to use on buffs or permanent effects or some skill that doesn't need to do damage and then can be applying other utility effects at the same time. The specialization options the character has through gear and passives also just lean further into this, where you are better off putting all of your power into the specific combination of mechanics that one of your primary skills uses than it is to spread it over a few skills to give you more options in combat. Because, as we already mentioned, it was already needing to be built, the skill needs to be built so it can do just about everything, so you don't really have any situational skills in the first place. This really hampered skill design because we can't have any particularly slow skills. We can't have a skill that is only useful for damaging a large number of monsters and has very little use if there's a single enemy. And we end up balancing the skills around the support gems and assuming that you've got a bunch of powerful damaging supports. We ended up having supports mostly exist as a way to boost your damage directly, which is cool, but there are plenty of other mechanics in the game that also boost your damage, so we don't need to use the support gem system for that. It also meant that mana had to be sort of averaged out based on attack and cast time, because you can't have a skill arbitrarily be something you can only use a little bit because of its mana cost, because it's going to be your damaging skill. And you're probably used to using all of your available mana, all of your available sockets, all of that on buffs that will just permanently affect your character, and once you turn them on, you won't think about them again until you die and revive and realize you haven't turned them on, this respawn. We thought about ways we could approach forcing the player to use a variety of skills and decided that we completely wanted to avoid cooldowns being the way that we force you to rotate through skills. We don't want to have skills with a long cooldown without a reason that feels very appropriate for the skill. And we also didn't want to add skills that would generate mana or generate a resource for you as their primary purpose, just so you can use other skills that you otherwise couldn't spend. That would be able to force you into using a combination of skills, but you would spend half your time doing almost no damage, and then all of your rest of your time doing a huge amount of damage, and you'll feel bad when you finally have to go back to your little bit of damage skill again, just so you can get some more mana to keep having fun. We also really wanted to avoid putting the character in a rotation. We don't want it ever be the case where you're like, okay, it's a boss, I'll just go 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and repeat until the boss is dead. So the focus is on every skill being situational or setting up a situation in a not entirely reliable way. We have all sorts of mechanics that help us achieve these goals. The new skill system, the support changes, the dual specialization, spirit system, and more. First, let's talk about the new skill system, which was announced at the first ExileCon, but we've kind of perfected it over the past few years. The character now starts with 9 sockets, so right from level 1, if you happen to carry over a bunch of gems or get really lucky and finding some uncut gems, you can fill your character with skills and be doing all sorts of things. They have their own sockets, and what this means is you start with 2 support sockets, so if you happen to find a support gem early on, you can just put it in and start using it right away. But as you progress, you will find currency that will... First, you'll find common currency that will upgrade it from 2 to 3 sockets, and you'll probably find a few of those before you find the currency that will upgrade a skill gem from 3 to 4 sockets. This means that your skills, large numbers of your skills will grow as you progress, rather than just you focus all of your currency and all of your investment on maximizing a single skill. It is naturally your character, as your character plays, you'll get more options for all of your skills. And this usually means that this also meant that we had to change how we think about socket colors as well. We really wanted you to stick with your skill gem. Once you find the gem that you want to keep using, you're not replacing that with another version that you find with more sockets, as the currency is going to be the thing letting you upgrade that. And so we did a similar thing with changing socket colors. If you find a blue support gem that you want to use, and you want to make the socket blue, it is a deterministic use of a chromatic orb to change one of your sockets to that color. So you know that you're not going to roll the dice with your 1 remaining chromatic orb to try and get a socket color that you don't have, and just find that you can't use any of the support gems you were using before, as well as the new one.
There's actually, just to extend on that thought, like there's a lot of situations in PoE 1 where you just kind of like, you can brick your character by just like making the bad choice with regard to rerolling, so you effectively don't want to use the rerolling stuff on your items that are important, otherwise you might screw yourself up. And we wanted to avoid all that to make sure that, like, yeah, if you want to just change a single color, like now chromatic is just, yeah, use it on the socket you want, pick the color you want it to be. So it makes it so you don't have those kinds of problems anymore. It just sort of allows it to allow you to do that sort of customization without that issue.
Yeah. There will probably be some late game mechanics where you can roll the dice and risk everything.
There are some late game things that you can, if you want to brick your items, we still have Varlorbs and things for.
But during the campaign, you don't need to worry about your skill gems. Right. They're safe and you can feel invested in them.
Right.
Support gems, we've really focused on taking them away from being damage boosts and put them more about customizing the skill. There's a lot of opportunity for you to just choose how you're going to use the skill. And a very important design principle for this was saying that you should not want to use the same support on every one of your skills. Even if you're using all slams, there shouldn't be a support that's like, well, this is a must-have for every slam skill. It should be that you're thinking about, well, this skill I'm going to use in the thick of combat, so I'm going to put the unbreakable support on it, so I'm much harder to stun out of while I'm doing the skill. While this skill here, Sunder, I'm going to use from safety, I'm going to use it from a distance, I'm going to snipe monsters with my Sunder, so I'm going to just focus on something that will give me a damage boost very occasionally. We have plenty of old favorites coming back, like the fork support that you can see, but they come at a cost that means that they're unlikely to be considered an absolute necessity for the skill to be as useful as we want it to be at the mid and early parts of the game. Things like Fist of War returns, so every now and then you get a big damage boost to your skill, but it is also, the cooldown is shared between your other skills, so you want to pick carefully which skill you're going to put Fist of War on. And we also have a number of mechanics, like for example the armor break mechanic that maces specialize in. There are support gems to let you put that on other skills, nowhere near as efficiently as the skills that focus entirely on applying armor break, but there is a way to build the combination of skills you want to use together if the skills that inherently come with those mechanics aren't the ones that you want to be using then and there. There's also the dual specialization system, which was shown off during the keynote, where you can have effectively multiple trees that are slightly different from each other for multiple builds. And this has a huge number of uses, both for combining multiple elements, combining different weapons, which is great for the mechanics that are specific to each weapon type, as well as just deciding that you want to be extra tanky in your second spec, deciding that you want to focus your second specialization on the area of effect so that you can do something different with your main specialization. And it does have the cost of needing to find two great weapons to take full advantage of it. But when you do get the two weapons that work well together, it can provide a huge amount of customization to your character. This also connects to reservation effects, where you can have a reservation effect enabled in one set and a different one in a second. So for example, I could have Cast on Shock, triggering my area of effect skills in my first set, and just do Spark to clear enemies, and then switch to my second set, and I could be having Cast on Crit there, and having a high crit spell that is then proccing my single target focused arc skill, and so I can be swapping back and forth based on the situation, or I can bind one of those skills to a specific situation so it automatically swaps back and forth. There is a small time taken to switch. There's a nice little animation if you're just grabbing the weapon off your back. You have to be tactical about how you use it, but it's small enough that in the thick of combat it's absolutely still very useful to just switch out just based on the situation that you're in that very moment.
I think the reservation thing you were saying before is really worth emphasizing, is like the whole, having the ability, for example, to have Arctic armor on one versus the other. Like, you'll just switch and instantly that will be on. Like, there's no like having to worry about it or having to recast it or anything like that. Like, you can just switch effectively all the reservation skills from one set to the other just as you weapon swap automatically based on what skills you're using. So it is pretty powerful.
And the reservation will remain on when you die as well. You need to remember to turn them back on again.
Useful bonus.
Especially when you have to, so you can there's a little menu where you can select which weapon set you want them to be in, including shapeshifting. Shapeshifting is its own set in that, so you can say, when I'm a bear, I want Arctic armor to be even tankier. Leading into that, Spirit. So Spirit is a new resource which is used for every permanent effect that you're just going to leave on your character the whole time. You no longer reserve your mana outside of probably some specialized mechanics or keystones or supports, and instead you're focusing on gaining as much spirit as you can if you are wanting to stack permanent effects. So minion characters really care about spirit because their permanent minions are paid with spirit, while their temporary minions are still paid with mana and need to be resummoned. This means as a minion character, you want to get as much spirit as you can to have as large an army, but maybe use some of that spirit for an aura as well. It's a sort of a balancing act and finding the combinations of minions you want, which may mean switching out which minions you have, or how many minions you have of each. We've added the ability to just manually unsummon your minions if you want to bring some others in, just to make everything a bit more convenient. And yeah, the fact that they can be set per set doesn't apply to minions, so your minions will just remain active the whole time, but you could switch out which aura is applying to them, or switch to a set that has more spirit, thanks to carrying a scepter, and then has an extra aura active only in that set. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you use your permanent buffs, and in addition we've tried to make the permanent buffs much more interesting rather than just flat stat bonuses as well. We also have a far more complex crowd control system where there are light stuns, as you can see that little flinch, and there are also heavy stuns if you do a large amount of damage, especially with melee weapons and especially with physical damage. You'll be able to knock a monster into a state where they won't be able to react to you for sometimes a very long time, giving you a huge opening, especially for melee characters, to just deal all the damage while the boss is just recovering. And this system is a system that is connected to freeze. It's connected to a new immobilization effect, which is something that spears specialize in applying at the moment. And the more you apply these, the harder it is to apply more of them to a boss, which does mean that in a team, you're both able to specialize in different mechanics, and you will both build up your effects on the boss, but the boss won't be locked out permanently from having a party of 6 people all applying crazy amounts of crowd control effects. It still gives you a huge tactical advantage, and many weapon types and spell types also take advantage of those mechanics. You can now rely on the fact that at some point during the boss fight, you'll be able to freeze them, and so you can follow through, and the same for applying a heavy stun. Most monsters have their own heavy stun animation where they get knocked down in a
the bosses anyway.
moment. The bosses definitely do.
Yeah. Some monsters as well, but the bosses are the main ones.
And this just makes playing a hard-hitting warrior character just feel really punchy as you're just taking the enemy out of combat for a time to just finish them off. The player also has to deal with the system in a mostly positive way, where if you are stunned, then your threshold will build up for the next stun, and that will repeat. So it's very hard to be freeze-locked or stun-locked. And it carries over between the crowd control effects as well. So being frozen means you're very unlikely to be stunned afterwards, making it safer for the player to recover from freeze quickly, and if they can react in time. And this does mean that monsters, that when you're beaten up by a lot of monsters at once, they will keep stacking up stun on you, but the player recovers from stun much, much faster than bosses do, so you don't need to worry about waiting outside of combat for the stun to fall off you. Within a few seconds, you're back into fighting shape again. It means that swarms of monsters can be a threat if you just let yourself be attacked by them, but in general, it's in the player's favor. The player cannot be heavy stunned, I should note. You're not going to be knocked on the ground for 8 seconds. It's just not a thing that you need to worry about, thankfully. Freeze is a little bit longer now, so you need to be a bit careful about freeze, but we've got flasks for that. Now let's take a look at some of the skills. This is a close look at Falling Thunder. Do you want to tell us a bit about the animations on this one, Ed?
Yeah, so this one, I really just wanted that slap in the ground pose. I don't know, I've done a little bit of stuff training back in the day, and that was just one that felt real good. and I wanted it in the game. It also gives this nice up in the air, like lightning strikey pose, kind of like Thor. And it just flows together really nicely. Like you can spam it, you can use it once, and it works on both occasions.
It was designed as a finisher, as it will spend power charges if you have them, but it's also just a fun to use area skill with some nice mobility to it.
Yeah.
This one you'll recognize as Killing Palm from the keynote. Power charge generator. This was one of the few ways to generate power charges. Power charges are not a simple thing to just stack up rapidly when you need them, but they are giving more than double the damage for every charge on that Falling Thunder skill. So they're a huge, huge damage boost, and they really reward you putting in the effort to finish off monsters with Killing Palm, as well as other power charge generating skills that have other similar, non-reliable, more skillful conditions for generating the charges. You want to tell us how you created this totally realistic and normal martial arts move?
Yep. So a big challenge for this was doing. I was told it had to be unarmed damage, so he had to hit them with his hand while holding a big stick, which is a little awkward. So the biggest challenge of this was just getting that stick out of the way and making it not the main spectacle, making the palm the main thing you're looking at.
Yeah, the unarmed attacks are a special skill there. An unarmed attack, but they can be used while you're holding a quarterstaff. They use your unarmed damage while your weapon's still in your hand. It's magic.
But you can also use them when you don't have a quarterstaff, right?
Yes.
And is there anything about one hand empty? Like, what about if you were holding like a mace?
You need both hands to be empty.
Both hands, okay, understood.
Yeah. This is a close look at the Wave of Frost skill. It's just a sick backflip, you know?
Yeah.
This is one of the things that led us into an early sort of, let's make something, what can you do with a staff? What's a cool monk ability? Let's get some Last Airbender stuff going on. And this led us into realizing how fun the mobility of the monk could be. This is the one that really started feeling like, oh, you're a monk, you do this, you then whirling assault through the enemies, and it's just got this awesome mobile feel.
Yeah, this was playing around with evasive maneuvers, and I didn't really plan it, but if you use this in tandem with whirling assault, like it just blended together so nicely, and you, like just with these two skills, we got a really good feel for how the monk would play, just kind of dancing around the battlefield.
And the effects artist did an amazing job with the ice and the graphical programmers as well. There's just some...
Look at that ice.
Nice ice. This is an old favorite, Sunder. Big, punchy, pack clearing damage. And we came to Ed with a thing of, hey, can you make a slam that looks good over maybe like 2 seconds? What can a character do for 2 seconds?
Yeah, so a big thing I wanted to try and avoid with the characters was with the big animations, not just holding a pose and shaking to build power. I wanted to make sure that the character stayed alive and was doing something interesting. So, yeah, I thought of the jump up in the air and the slam down and kind of worked backwards from there. Another thing that this animation has, which isn't present in a lot of the slams, is he doesn't stick the hammer in the ground. The hammer bounces straight up, and that lets him get back into the next move, like, quite energetically. Again, keeps him alive. He doesn't stop and just hang out. Yeah.
This is another mace ability with a lot of mobility. It's really shows that even with a gigantic hammer, you can have fun just moving around the battlefield. The first hit has massive bonus stun damage, letting you leave enemies vulnerable to apply that massive damage from the second strike.
Yeah, and this one shows off the moving variant that I was talking about before, like he just did it then, just a little like quick step as he's swinging the hammer back. This one just felt great real quick. It's an office favorite. Also, just a small difference in this from previous animations is after he finishes the swing, he actually steps forward through. So the motion of the attack just keeps moving forward. There's no like forward, then back, then forward, then back, then forward. Yeah, it keeps you just keep mowing through them. That's great.
Now here's one of our in-progress animations. This started out as a staff animation, was that right?
Yeah, this is my first attempt of whirling assault. I was being quite restrictive with how it played, and Rory told me off and said no, he has to move a lot further. So I came up with what it is now. But I still really like this animation, and I chucked a two-handed sword on it, and he reminded me of a certain white-haired monster hunter, and I thought that was really cool. So that's something we're working on.
I'm pretty sure we just saw this animation, like, yeah, this is a skill in the game, this is a sword thing now.
Sometimes it happens like that, yeah.
This is showing off some cool mobility that the Ranger will have. The Ranger is still quite static with their ranged attacks, but now they've got some cool tools that they can use to move around the battlefield when they need to.
Yeah, just playing with some backwards movement. Not much to say on this other than she used to do a backflip, and that was a bit excessive.
I'm pretty sure the brief was like, what would Legolas do?
Oh yeah, and this one took a lot of iteration. Turns out just stabbing a guy is like tricky to get feeling right, while also being describable on a single skill gem with all the different attack times you could end up doing with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the visual demonstration I was given was just this, and I thought, surely I can do something cooler.
There's nothing that inspires the animators more than seeing how bad it would be if I was doing it.
A challenging thing with this actually was getting height variation. When your camera's very high up, striking at different heights is quite hard to read, especially when you're just dealing with arms. So the way I got around that was just moving it into the body. I was kind of thinking of Wing Chun, kind of rapid punch style thing. Yeah, this one just feels real cool. That's fun to kill lots of zombies with.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's all the skills we have to show off right now. It's time for some questions. All right. Octavian.
Hello again, everyone. So there is a QR code up there behind me. It's pretty big, hard to miss. Go ahead and scan that if you want to send in any questions, and I will read them off here. The first question, very important one, we'll lead with a strong one. Does dodge roll work in towns?
I think so. Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I can answer yes, it does. I tested
I'm
that
pretty
it
sure it does.
It does.
Yeah. I mean, if being a bear currently
The real
works
question
in
is, yes, can you be a
towns,
bear in town? That's
Yeah.
That's the real question.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Because yes, you can. Currently.
The real question is, can you dodge roll as a bear in town? And the answer to
yes.
that is also yes.
Also, yes.
We need like a compilation, just a minute of a bear dodge rolling.
Yes,
Yes, the QA is about the bear now.
Yeah.
So just a clarification here, do we still get to use skills from other classes if we want to?
Yes, you can use any skill, any combination of weapons, all the elements, just all the things.
And sort of a lead on from that is, I might be wrong in this bit of trivia, but I believe in PoE 1, the Templar is left-handed with a lot of his attacks and stuff, right? Is there still going to be room in PoE 2 for that sort of like individualized personality, like monk dodge rolling differently than other people, that sort of thing?
We have the technology.
Yeah, we can we can definitely, we have the capability of doing unique animations for the different characters.
I believe that what we're sort of doing is like if you've got, we're much more likely to make a unique animation for the class we would expect the animation to be on. Yeah. So we'll probably have like quite a few of those for just like those cases, but then we're very unlikely to make a unique animation for like all the other classes that are not usually expected to use that skill. So they'll be able to do it, it's just they won't have that sort of unique flavor to them as much.
That does make sense.
Yeah, some characters have an additive layer as well to just hold their shoulders differently or whatever fits their pose. Yeah.
We've got a question here. How much control do players have over inbuilt movements on skills? Do support gems change the movement types, or are there other ways for players to influence this mechanic?
We already have some investment on the tree to specialize in using your dodge roll in a different way for a dexterity character, but a lot of it...
There's also shift attack. Holding shift has some influence in some cases on some skills, but it's all very much like skill by skill. Like there's also now the ability, although we haven't really utilized that much, where they've got the skill options area in the skill screen. So if there are particular things we want to allow the player to specialize about a skill, so for example, the always shift attack button is now in there. So like, yeah, there might be a few cases where we want to add a few things like that, but yeah, it's really skill by skill. Like you don't know what you need to do on a skill until you've tried it.
There's some of the skills already have custom behavior for targeting. Like for example, killing Palm will focus on a nearby colorable target, even if you target another enemy, just to make sure you get that power charge, since that's usually what you're using it for.
Right.
All right. Given so many skills have inbuilt mobility, is it then less important in some ways to scale attack and cast speed, or is that an equally valuable stat, would you say, as it is in PoE 1?
It's always going to offer you more survivability because you're going to get your hit out faster, but we're still keeping plenty of mechanics that reward you for using slow attacks or
But I mean,
your
part
next
of
attack.
the idea is to make it possible to make a build that is slower in PoE 2.
Yeah.
Like, you want the fast builds too, but we also want to be possible to be slow. In PoE 1, it's just not really possible, really. I mean, there's some things we've done over the years to try and make that more of a thing. There was like the sort of two-hand exerted stuff and a few other things like that, but it's just, like, we wanted to make it a lot more of an option.
It's rarely a bad idea to get a little bit more attack speed, but going out of your way to get it is nowhere necessary anymore.
Okay. Another question that's more of a clarification than anything else is you mentioned that skills are restricted by weapon type now. Does that mean that all skills can be used with only a single weapon type, including spells, or is this an attack limitation?
It's an attack limitation. There are a few fancy spells, like the Ethereal Blade skills now will use your daggers, but most spells are for any weapon type you want. They're a lot better with caster weapons.
Just for clarification, when you say ethereal, you mean ethereal knives?
Ethereal knives, yeah.
Probably an internal name I wasn't aware of.
I don't think are there even any other spells that require a weapon? I think it's just those knife ones, right?
We'll see when we get to the Templar skills.
Is there any plans for, and this may already be in the demo, but are there any plans for the dodge roll mechanic being modified by itemization?
We already have some passives on the tree that modify the dodge roll in some way, so we're definitely going to have mechanics that affect it. We've yet to really lock in exactly how far we'll go with that.
It's unexplored space to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's Path of Exile. How can we stop ourselves from doing crazy stuff with anything that we can do anything to?
Yeah, we're not very good at saying no. Well, the programmers are. Can the dual specialization weapon swap delay time be reduced by stats like attack speed or cast speed, or is that a fixed interval?
We are going to have stats specifically to increase the swap speed, and we're looking at different weapon types having different swap times as well, so it's easier to swap to lighter weapons than it is to a big heavy weapon.
I'm learning about that on stage.
I do have a thing that I forgot to mention during the talk that I realize I want to show off, which is mana costs are not paid instantly at the start of the skill now.
Yes.
They're paid over a time up to the point where the skill starts doing something, which does mean if you get stunned out or if you dodge roll out or you just cancel, you will save most of the mana, so you have much less of an issue of wasting all your resources, meaning it's okay for us to have larger cost skills, knowing that you're not going to lose it all if you get stunned out or you decide to change your mind at the last minute. Yeah,
just to clarify, like that system is just purely beneficial for the player. So we've not got much time left. We'll go to the final question here, which is on the gem crafting. How do Vol skills interact with gem crafting? I don't know that we know.
I think Vol skills we probably don't, like, isn't there enough to say there? I think they might not be.
Not really. We want to do some real cool stuff with them, and we're not locked in
we're
yet.
probably not ready to talk about Vol skills, I'd say. But it's definitely going to be. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah, we shouldn't really design them on stage right now, but
by committee. All right. Well, I think that is our time for this talk. So,
awesome.
Head on out.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.